You ever have one of those days where everything feels off? Like the air itself is warning you something bad is about to happen? That's exactly how the morning started on the day my life turned upside down. The sun had barely crested over the hills when I heard it, a loud, splintering crash that echoed through the house like a shotgun blast. I barely had time to react. My boots scraped against the hardwood floor as I lunged for the old double barrel I kept tucked behind the door. But before I could even get a firm grip, the front door exploded inward in a shower of splinters. In marched a mob, not cops. Not even private security, but a pack of smug, clipboard-carrying HOA board members. Leading the charge was none other than Karen Whitfield, the self-proclaimed Queen of Green Hollow Estates. Karen stood there in a crisp navy suit, her bleached hair wound so tight it looked like it could snap. In one manicured hand, she waved a red sheet of paper like it was the Magna Carta. By order of the Green Hollow Estates HOA, all firearms are hereby confiscated for the safety of the community, she barked, her voice slicing the air like a whip. I froze, shotgun half raised, stunned stupid by what I was hearing. Confiscate my guns? On my land? This wasn't some postage stamp backyard in suburbia. This was a 30-acre ranch my grandfather had bled and sweated to carve out of the wild hills. You can't do this, I shouted, my voice hoarse with disbelief. This is private property. I'm not even part of your damn HOA. Karen gave a wolfish grin. Check your mailbox, Jake Anderson. You were annexed 6 months ago. You had your chance to appeal. Before I could blink, two of her cronies, guys I'd seen handing out parking violation tickets last week, lunged forward and ripped the shotgun right out of my hands. Hey! That's theft, I roared, trying to grab it back. But another board member, a scrawny guy with a clipboard and a taser strapped awkwardly to his belt, stepped between us. Behind them, more of Karen's lackeys were swarming through the house like termites. I heard cabinet doors banging open, drawers slamming. They found the gun safe in the hallway within seconds. It wasn't even locked. My heart sank as they dragged out every precious firearm inside, Grandpa's lever-action Winchester, my old hunting rifle, even the Civil War replica musket that had been handed down like a family heirloom. Karen watched the whole scene unfold with the triumphant sneer of a cat about to kill a canary. Read the bylaw, she said smugly, tossing the red sheet onto the floor like it was a used tissue. In Green Hollow Estates, your so-called constitutional rights don't mean squat if the board votes otherwise. And we did. Last month. Unanimous. I could barely breathe. This couldn't be real. Yet there it was, my weapons being piled unceremoniously into the back of a rusted HOA maintenance van parked outside. Like junkyard scrap. Neighbors had gathered on the driveway. Some stood with arms crossed, looking sympathetic but too scared to act. Others just watched with bland indifference, as if this was some kind of reality TV show instead of a home invasion. Karen followed me outside, heels clicking triumphantly against the porch steps. She paused at the bottom, arms crossed, surveying the chaos she had unleashed. Better get used to it, Jake, she said, her voice syrupy with fake concern. You're living under our rules now. The van doors slammed shut. Dust kicked up around the tires as it pulled away, taking everything, my rights, my heritage, my defenses, with it. I stood there, fists clenched so hard my knuckles turned white, feeling like I had been gutted and left for dead. And deep down, one terrifying truth sank in. This was only the beginning. The dust hadn't even settled from the so-called gun confiscation when trouble came knocking again, this time, quite literally, the next afternoon, while I was nursing a black coffee and the slow, simmering rage of a man wronged. A battered HOA golf cart came sputtering down my driveway. In the seat was Carl Simmons, the HOA's so-called compliance officer, a wiry little weasel of a man who looked like he'd sell out his own grandma for a Starbucks gift card. Behind him, two men I'd never seen before, wearing dark green uniforms that looked suspiciously homemade. Private HOA security was stenciled on the back in cheap iron-on letters. I set my coffee down slow, forcing myself to stay calm, and walked to meet them halfway. Carl hopped off the cart, waving a fresh piece of paper like it was a death warrant. "Mr. Anderson," Carl announced, voice trembling slightly, "you are hereby served a notice of eviction for repeated violations of the Green Hollow Estates community standards. You have 72 hours to vacate the premises." I stared at him for a long, slow moment. Then, quietly, dangerously, I said, "Get that piece of trash off my land before I shove it down your throat." Carl flinched so hard he nearly dropped the notice. One of the guards stepped forward, one hand resting casually on the baton strapped to his belt. The threat was crystal clear. I took a step closer, my boots crunching against the gravel. "This is my land," I said, voice low enough to make them lean in to hear. "My family's land. You have no legal right here. Not now. Not ever." Carl swallowed, throat bobbing nervously. Still, he had his orders. He nodded to the guard, who pulled a hammer and a nail from his belt and, right in front of me, hammered the eviction notice onto the old oak beam by my porch. Each hammer strike echoed like gunfire in the heavy afternoon air. Wham, wham, wham. It was a violation, a desecration, a slap to the face of everything my grandfather had built with his bare hands. "You have 72 hours," Carl repeated weakly, backing toward the cart like he expected me to lunge at him any second. "After that, we'll proceed with reclamation." Reclamation. Like I was some kind of squatter on my own damn property. They climbed back into the golf cart and sped away in a cloud of dust, leaving me standing there with the eviction notice flapping in the breeze like some grotesque flag. I ripped the paper off the beam, crumpled it in my fist, and hurled it onto the graveled driveway. My hands shook with rage. My vision blurred. I had two choices: I could let them roll over me, watch Karen and her goons steal my home out from under me, or I could fight like hell. The decision wasn't even hard. I marched back inside, grabbed my truck keys off the counter, and headed straight for town. The county clerk's office closed at 6, and I intended to beat down their door if I had to. The drive was a blur, dirt road flashing under my tires, the wind tearing at my hat. By the time I screeched into the county parking lot, my boots hit the pavement running. Inside, I slammed the eviction notice down in front of Doris Clayton. The county clerk, a tough woman with silver hair and reading glasses perched low on her nose. "Doris," I said, breathing hard, "I need you to find out if there's any legal filing on my property. Anything. Please." She peered over her glasses, frowning, and tapped away on her ancient keyboard. For a moment, the only sound was the clack of keys. Then she looked up, her face grim. "Jake, you're not going to like this." My stomach turned to ice. "There's a pending lien against your property," she said softly, "filed 2 weeks ago, by Green Hollow Estates HOA. They're claiming over $30,000 in fines." I staggered back a step like she'd punched me. $30,000. Fines I never agreed to. Fines I never even knew about. I clenched my fists until my knuckles popped. "Can they evict me over this?" I rasped. Doris shook her head slowly. "It's shady as hell. Jake, you're not even listed within the original HOA boundaries. If you get a good lawyer, you can fight this. You can win. But you have to move fast." "Thanks, Doris," I said, voice thick with gratitude. I turned on my heel and raced back to my truck, heart pounding, a war drum beat in my chest. This wasn't just about a ranch anymore. This was about a fight for my future. And if Karen Whitfield wanted a war, she was about to get one. By the time I screeched into the dusty parking lot of Parker and Finch law offices, the sun was already dipping behind the hills. I killed the engine, grabbed the crumpled eviction notice from the passenger seat, and headed for the door. Sam Parker wasn't the slick city lawyer type. He was an old war horse, gray at the temples, calloused hands from growing up on a farm just like mine, and a voice that could make a jury sit up and say yes, sir, before they even knew what he was asking. When I walked in, Sam was behind his desk, chewing on a toothpick and flipping through a battered case file. He looked up, narrowed his eyes, and grunted. "Jake Anderson. Haven't seen you since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Sit. Tell me what's burning your tail feathers." I didn't waste a second. I laid it all out: the fake fines, the gun seizure, the eviction notice, the so-called lien. Sam listened without interrupting, the toothpick grinding between his molars. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a long, low whistle. "That's one hell of a mess," he said. "But son, I'll tell you this much, they screwed up. Big time." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in days. "Karen Whitfield and her pack of fools have no legal authority over you," Sam continued, jabbing a thick finger at the crumpled notice. "They overreached hard. And the courts don't take kindly to land theft dressed up as community management." "So we can fight this?" I asked. Sam's mouth curled into a slow, wolfish grin. "We're not just gonna fight. We're gonna shove this whole HOA scam down their throats." He pulled a legal pad toward him and started scribbling furiously. "First step," he said. "Emergency injunction to freeze the eviction. Then civil suits, illegal seizure of property, harassment, abuse of process. Might even tack on a civil rights claim for good measure." I stood up, feeling like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. "Thank you, Sam." He waved it off. "You can thank me after we nail their hides to the courthouse wall. Now go home. And don't you touch a damn thing. No barn locks, no fences, no self-help. Let 'em hang themselves deeper." Driving home that evening, I allowed myself a rare smile. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought. But the smile barely lasted until the next morning. I was tightening a fence post when the roar of engines shattered the quiet. I turned in time to see a small convoy rumbling down the driveway, 3 golf carts and 2 pickups, all bearing the Green Hollow Estates logo. At the front, of course, sat Karen Whitfield, perched in the passenger seat of a sparkling white golf cart like some twisted queen surveying her domain. I set my tools down and crossed my arms as they pulled up. Karen stepped out, holding a new piece of paper and a shiny black padlock. "Jake Anderson," she announced loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "under HOA authority, your barn is hereby sealed pending legal forfeiture. Any attempt to access it will be treated as trespassing and property damage." I stared at her, stunned into silence for half a heartbeat. "You're insane, Karen," I said finally. "You can't just lock up my property." Her smile was cold enough to freeze fire. "Watch me." 2 of her goons marched up to the barn, clamped the lock onto the heavy oak doors, and then hammered a bright yellow notice right onto the wood. "HOA property, no entry." I took a step forward, fists clenched so tight my fingernails dug into my palms. One of the guards, a stocky brute with a neck thicker than his head, casually rested his hand on the taser at his belt. Karen sauntered closer, heels crunching against the gravel. "You thought you could make a mockery of my authority," she whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "You thought you could embarrass me? You have no idea who you're messing with." I said nothing, just stared at her, memorizing every smug line of her face. "See you in court, cowboy," she said sweetly, then turned on her heel and strutted back to her golf cart. The engines roared to life, and the convoy peeled away, leaving me standing alone in the dust, my barn padlocked, my blood boiling hotter than a branding iron. For a moment, I stood there, fists trembling, 1,000 reckless ideas flashing through my mind. Kick down the doors, rip the lock off with the tractor, march over to Karen's mansion and shove the notice right through her front window. But Sam's warning echoed in my mind, "Let them hang themselves." I took a deep breath, forced myself to turn away, forced myself to live another day without giving them the ammunition they so desperately wanted. But deep down, I made a promise. Karen had declared war, and I intended to finish it. The next few days passed in a blur of restless nights and hard days. Every time I passed the locked barn, the anger flared up again like a fresh wound. But I remembered Sam's advice: patience, not rage, would win this war. So I got to work. The first thing I did was print out every document Sam had dug up, the original property maps, the old cooperation agreement my grandfather had signed, every HOA boundary line proving that my ranch wasn't legally under Karen's jurisdiction. Then, under the cover of dusk, I started visiting the neighbors. I didn't knock like a desperate man. I didn't rant about injustice. I simply showed them the proof, calmly and clearly. No threats, no yelling, just facts. Some slammed their doors in my face. Fear still ran deep in Green Hollow Estates. But others listened. Really listened. Mrs. Ramirez across the lane, whose daughter got fined $500 because her graduation party had too many guests. Old man Brewer, fined for parking his own pickup truck in his own driveway. The Langleys, whose autistic son was threatened with fines because his therapy dog violated the pet policy. They weren't just angry. They were hungry for someone, anyone, to stand up to Karen Whitfield's little dictatorship. One by one, they agreed to sign affidavits backing my case. By the end of the week, I had a thick stack of signatures and statements, and more importantly, I had something that scared Karen more than lawsuits ever could: momentum. The following Monday, Sam and I filed the emergency injunction with the county courthouse. We didn't just argue that the eviction was illegal, we argued that the entire expansion of HOA jurisdiction was fraudulent. Judge Harris, a no-nonsense woman with a reputation for hammering anyone who played fast and loose with the law, granted a temporary restraining order immediately. Effective that moment, the HOA was forbidden from touching me, my property, or my possessions until a full hearing could be held. I was still grinning like a fool when I pulled back into my driveway that afternoon. That's when I saw it. A new sign nailed to my fence, big, bold, and printed in neon yellow: unauthorized assembly, fine, $5,000. I laughed out loud, right there on the graveled driveway, scaring a few grazing cows nearby. Karen was getting desperate. She had fined me for talking to my own neighbors on my own land. It was almost pitiful, if it hadn't been so infuriating. That night, as I was oiling the hinges on the front gate, my phone buzzed. Mrs. Ramirez, breathless and whispering, "Jake, they're calling an emergency HOA meeting right now about you." My gut twisted. I didn't even ask for details. I wiped my hands on my jeans, jumped into the truck, and peeled out down the dark road toward the Green Hollow Estates Community Center. When I arrived, the parking lot was packed. Pickup trucks, sedans, even a few golf carts jammed every available space. The building was lit up like a Christmas tree. Inside, it was standing room only. At the front of the room, standing tall behind a microphone, was Karen Whitfield, wearing a sharp blue blazer and the kind of expression you usually only see on politicians right before a scandal breaks. She tapped the mic, sending an ear-splitting screech through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice dripping with false sweetness, "we are here tonight to address an urgent threat to the peace and prosperity of our beloved community." Whispers rippled through the crowd. I pushed my way toward the front, heart hammering. Karen smiled coldly when she saw me. Jake Anderson's repeated defiance, illegal gatherings, and threats to the HOA's authority leave us no choice, she continued. "Tonight, we vote on whether to authorize a full property seizure of Mr. Anderson's ranch under Article 14C, emergency reclamation powers." Murmurs turned into angry chatter. Some faces looked shocked, others nodding, eager for drama. I took a step forward. "This is illegal," I said, loud enough to silence the room. Karen's smile widened like a shark's. "This is democracy, Mr. Anderson," she purred. "Majority rules." She raised a clipboard. "All in favor, say aye." Before she could finish, the double doors at the back of the hall slammed open with a bang. Everyone turned. There, framed against the bright outdoor lights, stood Deputy Elena Marks, cool as a glacier. one hand resting lightly on her holstered sidearm. In the other hand, she held up a thick sheaf of papers. "This meeting is over," she barked, voice slicing through the tension like a cleaver. Gasps erupted. Karen's face drained of color. Deputy Marks marched forward, heels clicking on the tile floor, and slammed the court order onto the podium. "Judge Harris has issued a cease and desist against Green Hollow Estates HOA," she said, glaring at Karen. "Any further action against Jake Anderson will be considered criminal harassment, property theft, and conspiracy." The room exploded into chaos, shouts, arguments, people abandoning their seats. Karen staggered back from the microphone, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. And me? I just stood there, arms crossed, watching her world fall apart, one broken lie at a time. The night after Deputy Marks shut down the emergency meeting, you could feel the tension thick in the air like a thunderstorm about to break. I sat on the porch, the old bullwhip Grandpa Tom had used leaning against the wall, a loaded shotgun resting quietly across my lap, just in case. The cows were restless. The night felt wrong. And then I heard it. The low rumble of engines creeping up the dirt road. Headlights off, trying to slither through the darkness unseen. I rose to my feet slowly, heart pounding, and slipped into the shadows by the barn. Two black SUVs rolled up near the locked barn doors. Figures jumped out, dressed in dark hoodies and gloves, crowbars glinting in the moonlight. At the head of them, Karen Whitfield herself. She wasn't wearing her usual polished suit. Tonight, she looked feral, hair loose, eyes wide and wild. And in her hand, a red gas can. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just here to vandalize. They were here to burn my barn, to destroy the evidence. Destroy everything. I didn't wait. I flipped the old floodlights Grandpa had rigged years ago. Boom, the whole front yard lit up like noon in July. The intruders froze, blinking like stunned rats. I stepped out from the shadows, shotgun leveled, voice booming. "Not one more step, Karen." She jumped like she'd been slapped. But then she snarled, lifting the gas can threateningly. "This is your last chance, Jake. Walk away or everything you love burns tonight." "You're trespassing, attempted arson, conspiracy, theft, harassment," I counted calmly, stepping closer. "And you're about 2 seconds away from making it worse." From the corner of my eye, I saw flashing blue and red lights crest the hill. Deputy Marks had been parked down the road all night, just in case. The cavalry was here. Karen's crew panicked. One dropped his crowbar and bolted for the SUV. Another tripped and hit the dirt hard. Karen? She stood her ground, gas can in one hand, lighter in the other, like some crazed villain in a bad movie. "It's mine," she shrieked, spit flying. "The whole ranch should have been mine. You don't deserve it." Deputy Marks' cruiser skidded into the driveway, siren whooping once. She leapt out, gun drawn. "Drop it now, Karen," she barked. For a second, I thought Karen might actually try it, light the match and go down in flames. But at the last moment, she crumbled. The lighter fell from her shaking fingers. The gas can clattered to the ground. Two deputies tackled her to the dirt, handcuffing her roughly as she screamed and kicked. "You're finished, Karen," I said quietly, as they hauled her toward the squad car. "You hear me, Walker?" she shrieked, hair flying wild around her face. "I'll ruin you. You'll see." I didn't answer. I just turned away, staring up at the stars shining cold and bright above the ranch Grandpa Tom had built with his own 2 hands. This land wasn't Karen's. It never had been. And now, it never would be. 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. Neighbors crammed into every seat. Reporters lined the back wall. And at the front, Karen Whitfield sat in the defendant's chair, pale, haggard, and very, very alone. Judge Harris didn't even bother hiding her disdain. After reviewing the overwhelming evidence, she said sharply, "This court finds Karen Whitfield guilty on multiple counts: attempted arson, property theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, harassment, and abuse of power. Karen whimpered as the deputies clicked handcuffs onto her wrists once again, this time for a long stay. The HOA board dissolved shortly after. Every member associated with Karen either resigned or skipped town entirely. But the community wasn't destroyed. It was reborn. A month later, the residents of Green Hollow Estates, newly freed from tyranny, held a special election. They didn't even wait for me to volunteer. When the results were tallied, I stood on the steps of the community center, the same place where Karen had tried to destroy me, and accepted the title of HOA president with a solemn nod. I wasn't in it for power. I was in it to protect my neighbors, my home, and the legacy of the people who built this land. New bylaws were passed. No unauthorized fines, no illegal seizures, full homeowner rights restored, full financial transparency enforced. Grandpa Tom would have been proud. That evening, I sat on the porch again. The old musket he once loved polished and mounted over the fireplace inside. The cattle grazed peacefully. The barn doors swung open in the breeze. Free and clear. Mrs. Ramirez brought over a fresh apple pie. Old man Brewer dropped off a case of cold beer. The Langley boy ran across the field, laughing. And for the first time in a long, long time, the ranch felt alive again. Home, safe, mine. And no one, not Karen Whitfield, not any bully hiding behind a fake title, would ever take it from me again. Because some things in life are worth fighting for. And if you're lucky enough to have something worth protecting, you fight. You stand your ground. You never, ever back down.